My name is Joanna, and at 28, the fine china shimmered beneath the chandelier's glow as I sat across from my parents at their grand mahogany dining table. Everything about the room mirrored them. Orderly, precise, untouched by anything that wasn't curated to perfection. The soft hum of the chandelier filled the silence until my mother, Marjorie, lifted the decanter and poured another glass of wine. My father, Alden, slid a thick cream-colored envelope across the table with deliberate ease, the corner catching the light like a knife. "Joanna," he began, his tone warm but calculated. "This is about security. Yours, ours, the family's." I kept my hands folded in my lap, the satin of my dress brushing against my palms as I tried to keep my breathing steady. The envelope sat between us, unassuming and heavy, like a loaded question. My mother gave a smile so polished it could have been rehearsed. "It's just a formality," she said softly. "One family, one future." I reached for the envelope, sliding the papers free. The crisp pages fanned open, the scent of printer ink sharp in the air. The words blurred for a second before focusing. Dense legal language that hid a simple truth. Every account, every investment, every property I owned would be absorbed into a single family trust, managed exclusively by my parents. My father nudged a sleek black pen toward me. "This way," he continued, his tone silky. "We all move forward together. No silos, no risk, just unity." Inside, a muscle tightened in my chest. They weren't asking, they were claiming. My life's work, my independence, the empire I had built from grit and sleepless nights, all reduced to a signature. I raised my gaze slowly. The faint glimmer in their eyes told me they already believed they'd won, that I would fold, as I always had, out of loyalty or guilt, or both. But this time, my lips lifted into something quiet and deliberate. A smile that wasn't for them. "If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you," I said softly, "tell me where you're watching from." The words seemed to still the room. My mother's hand stiffened around the wine stem, her knuckles whitening. My father's jaw clenched, the faint tick in his temple betraying him. And then, as if on cue, the butler stepped forward, his voice composed but uneasy. "Ma'am," he announced, "your lawyer is here." I leaned back, calm, pulse steady. The real conversation was just beginning. Helena's heels echoed like punctuation marks across the marble as she entered behind me. My parents' eyes narrowed, confusion flickering before annoyance took its place. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I felt her presence settle beside me, grounded and sharp. But before Helena spoke, my mind drifted, pulled backward through years of the quiet battles that had brought me here. In my early 20s, Portland was a city remaking itself, grit turning into gold overnight. I saw opportunity where others saw decay. While my friends were losing nights to rooftop bars and late parties, I was crouched on the cracked floors of forgotten kitchens, tearing up tile, sanding wood, breathing dust and paint. My palms bled, my back ached, but each morning I went back. I took what little I had and flipped it into something more. At 25, I closed on my first Craftsman duplex. The day I held those keys, I cried in the car, because for once, I wasn't surviving. I was winning. When I told my parents, their reaction was an indifferent shrug. My mother laughed lightly. "You got lucky," she said. My father followed with, "Without our example, you'd never have made it this far." They didn't see the years I'd spent patching drywall at midnight or skipping dinners to meet deadlines. They only saw a reflection of themselves, something to claim. And it wasn't the first time they'd withheld support to teach me a lesson. In college, I'd begged them to co-sign my student loans. They refused, insisting responsibility would build character. It did, but not in the way they expected. It built resilience. It taught me to survive on 2 shifts and 4 hours of sleep, to stretch ramen into a week, to never depend on anyone who saw help as leverage. By the time I hit 27, that duplex had grown into a small portfolio, 3 properties, then 5, each one proof that I could shape a life from scratch. Still, my parents minimized it. To them, I was the lucky daughter dabbling in business. To me, I was proof they'd been wrong. Now, sitting at that table under their chandelier, the irony wasn't lost on me. Their refusal to lift me had created the independence they resented, and now they wanted to take it back. I should have seen it coming. The trust papers weren't a spontaneous betrayal. They were the culmination of years of subtle manipulation disguised as advice. "You should merge finances," my mother had said once, stirring sugar into her tea. "Families thrive when they share." My father's approach was sharper. "Money should stay in the family," he told me one evening. "Don't forget who sacrificed to give you your start." He said it so often I almost believed it. But every sacrifice they mentioned was something I had earned alone. One day, I came home from a showing early and found my father in my apartment. My apartment. The locks were new. I'd never given him a key. He stood at my desk, flipping through files. Deeds, bank statements, receipts. He froze when I walked in. "Just curious," he said casually, closing a folder like nothing had happened. I forced a polite smile, but inside something shifted. After he left, I noticed one envelope, the latest property closing, was slightly out of place. A page had been thumbed through. For weeks, I told myself it was harmless. Parents worry. Parents pry. But that wasn't love, it was surveillance. It was ownership disguised as care. By the time the envelope slid across that dinner table tonight, I understood exactly what this was. Not about unity, not about legacy, about control. Helena's entrance cut through the tension like a cold wind. She placed her briefcase on the table, her gaze cool and unreadable. "Good evening," she said evenly. "I understand there's a contract my client is meant to review." Marjorie's smile faltered. "This is a private family matter," she said sharply. "There's no need for lawyers." Helena didn't so much as blink. She pulled the papers free, flipped through them with the precision of a surgeon, and stopped halfway through. "Wow," she murmured, snapping the folder shut. "This isn't a trust. It's a total transfer of authority. If Joanna signed this, she'd surrender every cent she owns. Every asset, every property, every account." Silence pressed in. My father cleared his throat. "It's about trust," he said. "Protecting our family from unnecessary risk." "Interesting," Helena replied, tone smooth as steel. "Because from where I'm sitting, she's the only one giving anything up. If it's about trust, where's yours?" My mother's smile returned, stretched and trembling. "You know us, Joanna. We'd never hurt you. This is only paperwork, nothing more." I rested my palms against the table, feeling the grain of the polished wood. The contract lay between us, its presence loud and final. I could feel them waiting for me to break, waiting for that obedient nod. Instead, I met their eyes. "We're finished here tonight." For a fraction of a second I saw it, something I had never seen in them before. Not control, not triumph, but fear. It flickered across both faces before they masked it, but I caught it, and I held it like a weapon. I pushed my chair back slowly. The scrape of wood against tile echoed like thunder. "Sit down, Joanna," my father said sharply. "You're not thinking straight." My mother's hand fluttered toward the wine glass still untouched in front of me. "There's something you need to hear first," she said softly, her voice a silk thread around a blade. "Something that changes everything." Against my better judgment, I sat again. Helena didn't move, her arms folded, her presence a quiet anchor behind me. My father laced his fingers together. "The Vance estate in Rhode Island," he began, "has been tied up in probate for years. That's about to end. We're about to regain full control of the property and everything attached to it. It's worth far more than you can imagine." Marjorie leaned forward, the gleam in her eyes returning. "And of course, dear, as our daughter, you'll benefit too. But we need unity. Judges don't favor fractured families. Stability ensures inheritance." The implication was crystal clear. Sign the contract, prove my loyalty, and I'd be rewarded. Refuse, and I'd be erased. They kept talking, spinning the estate like it was a crown waiting for me to claim. If only I'd kneel first. But beneath the sugar-coated promises, I saw the truth. The Rhode Island estate wasn't a gift. It was a leash. A gilded chain disguised as legacy. My wealth was their leverage now, and the inheritance was bait. I turned to Helena. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes told me everything. She saw it too. My father's gaze hardened. "Without us," he said coldly, "you'll lose everything." I straightened, the faintest smile touching my lips. The irony was almost poetic. They had given me nothing, yet now they threatened to take it all. Helena placed a hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we weren't finished. And I knew then that the only way forward was not just to defend what I had built, but to uncover just how deep their desperation ran. After that dinner, I knew talk would get me nowhere. My parents weren't negotiating. They were cornering. So every next morning I hired a private investigator. His name was Grant Mercer, a man with a reputation for finding truths. People went to great lengths to bury. He worked quickly. Within a week, he placed a thick file on Helena's desk, and we went through it together. Each page was a window into the life my parents had been hiding, the Rhode Island estate they had dangled in front of me. It was mortgaged to the hilt, collateral for loans they had taken out over the last decade. The grand image of wealth they paraded, antique furnishings, charitable galas, curated elegance was a mirage. Behind it lay years of reckless spending patched together by desperate borrowing. But the worst blow came near the end of the file. An application for a new credit line bearing my name. My signature had been forged, but it was careful. Someone who had watched me sign documents countless times. I stared at the page until the lines blurred, rage and disbelief clawing at me. I thought about the little passbook savings account they opened for me when I was a child. I remembered my father lifting me up to the teller's counter, telling me I was learning responsibility. Back then, I believed them. Now, looking at the forged document, I realized they weren't teaching me responsibility at all. They were teaching themselves access. Helena's voice broke through my haze. "This isn't just manipulation, Joanna. It's fraud and it's criminal." Thebe Trail felt heavier than the paper in my hands. These were the people who raised me, who claimed to know what was best for me. Now they were stealing not just from my accounts, but from the very identity I had built without them. I set the file down and forced my hands to unclench. If they had crossed this line, there was no telling how far they were willing to go. And I knew the next step was to confront not just their debts, but the twisted logic that justified it all. The forged credit line haunted me long after I left Helena's office. It wasn't just the act itself. It was what it revealed. Late that night, lying awake, my mind wandered back to memories I had never questioned until now. When he was 10, I begged for piano lessons. My parents refused, telling me I needed to learn discipline without indulgence. When I asked for help with college applications, they brushed me off with a lecture about independence. And when I pleaded for a co-signature on my first loan, they refused again, claiming it was tough love. For years, I carried those moments like badges of resilience, proof that I could weather anything without their support. But looking back now, I saw them for what they were: rehearsals. They weren't teaching me independence. They were conditioning me to accept abandonment, to normalize neglect, so that when exploitation came later, I might confuse it with love. The thought made me sick. Still, guilt slithered in, whispering that I was being unfair. After all, hadn't they given me a roof, meals, clothes? Wasn't I ungrateful for rejecting the people who raised me? I voiced this once to Helena, and she leaned forward, eyes steady on mine. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal, Joanna. Betrayal already happened to you. Don't mistake survival for selfishness. Her words settled into me like stone, solid and undeniable. The weight of years lifted, replaced by something harder, sharper. I wasn't the child they'd tried to mold anymore. I wasn't someone who would bend out of guilt or fold under obligation. By the time I left her office that evening, my resolve was clear. My parents had written my childhood into a story of sacrifice and obedience. Now it was my turn to rewrite the ending, and I knew exactly where the confrontation had to begin. Helena wasted no time. After the forged credit line surfaced, she brought in a forensic accountant she trusted, a quiet man named Drayton, who had a talent for tracing money through shadows. Within days, he uncovered what I suspected but hadn't been able to prove: a hidden offshore account in my parents' names. The statements were staggering: transfers from shell companies, loans stacked on loans, and debts rolled over like dice on a rigged table. They had been juggling liabilities for years, using the illusion of wealth to buy more time. The truth was plain. Without an infusion of cash, their empire was already crumbling, and the lifeline they had chosen was me. Helena's office became a wareroom. She assembled the evidence into a clean, devastating file. Fraud, attempted forgery, coercion, each section airtight. Each page a nail in the coffin of their performance as noble benefactors. But I knew facts alone wouldn't be enough. My parents thrived on narrative, on turning guilt into currency. so added something they couldn't dismiss as technical. Memory turned tangible. Years ago, my grandmother's locket and my grandfather's cufflinks had disappeared from the family safe. My parents told me they were being appraised. I accepted the explanation back then, but part of me always knew better. Now, tucked into Drayton's report, I placed the pawn shop receipts Helena had tracked down. Proof they had sold our heirlooms for quick cash. Proof their theft reached back not just into my adulthood, but into Thevry legacy they claimed to protect. When I looked at the growing pile of documents, I felt no satisfaction, only clarity. They had built a tower of lies so tall it was bound to collapse. All I needed to do was give it the right push, and for that, there was only one place left to deliver the blow, back at their own dinner table. The next invitation arrived in the same gilded envelope as always, thick with pretense. My parents thought I would come alone, but I walked into their dining room with Helena at my side. The table was set with crystal and silver, but beneath the gleam, I could feel the tension pressing like humidity before a storm. Alden greeted me with his familiar air of command. "We trust you've reconsidered," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Marjorie's smile was brittle, her eyes shining with the confidence of someone convinced victory was inevitable. I sat. But instead of opening the folder they had prepared for me, Helena placed her own file squarely in the center of the table. She flipped it open with deliberate calm. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, pawned heirlooms, and debts stacked so high the estate is a hollow shell. The color drained from my mother's face. She reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Joanna, this isn't what it looks like. We only wanted to protect the family, to protect you." My father's composure cracked in a different direction. His fist slammed the armrest, rattling the silverware. "This is betrayal. After all we've done, you dare to side with outsiders against us?" I met his fury with steady eyes. "Family doesn't mean ownership. You've mistaken me for your rescue fund. I won't be the solution to debts you created." Marjorie's pleas dissolved into sobs, while Alden's glare cut across the room like a blade. But neither had time to recover. The sound of sirens filtered through the tall windows, growing louder until red and blue lights strobed against the glass. Helena closed the file and leaned back as footsteps echoed in the hall. The knock at the door was sharp, final. I watched as the officer entered, my parents' faces collapsing under the weight of exposure, and in that moment I understood there was no turning back. The weeks that followed moved quickly. News of the investigation spread, and with it the collapse of the illusion my parents had built. The Rhode Island estate, once their proudest boast, was pulled into foreclosure. Creditors lined up at every door, stripping away what little remained of their borrowed grandeur. I watched from a distance, not with glee but with a clarity I had never felt before. Their downfall wasn't mine to mourn, it was theirs to own. Meanwhile, I tightened the guard around my own life. Every property deed, every account statement, every safeguard I had prepared was secured in a fireproof safe. I changed locks, updated passwords, left nothing vulnerable. For the first time, my future felt entirely mine, untouched by guilt or expectation. One evening, I sat across from Helena at a quiet wine bar. Between us, no contracts, no files, just 2 glasses, and the steady hum of relief. She raised hers with a small smile. "To freedom, hard-earned," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, the sound sharp, decisive. "To freedom," I echoed, letting the words settle deep in my chest. Blood ties had once defined me, a threat I thought I was obligated to follow, no matter where it led. But now I knew better. Love could exist without control, and family could be chosen, not imposed. As I walked home that night, the air felt lighter, the city streets alive with possibility. Freedom, I realized, was my truest inheritance, and I intended to protect it with everything I